So now that we have the code to clear local storage, let's actually do something a little more, I'd say, interesting with the user interface part of this. Because imagine when you're asking the user if they want to do something that's destructive, almost always we see some kind of confirm. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to write code that does that for our app. But I want you to see it before we start coding it so you have this in your mind. So in this case, if I click here, then it's going to change. This is what we're about to code. Are you sure? If I don't click within 3 seconds, it's going to revert back to its default state. Okay, meaning as you can see, a couple things are happening here. We're changing the context of the button. We're changing the class of the button, right? But if I do click here, then it actually does clear that. Meaning it clears local storage, it re-renders the table with no entries. We'd still see the button will handle that later. But I just want you to have this in mind as we go into this section, because sometimes you're going to be wondering, why are we doing certain things? And when we're coding for UI, there's many things we have to account for. But in this case, we're also in this way we're going to get introduced to what's called asynchronous code, meaning you do something or you request something and you wait. And then a certain amount, and in this case we're going to wait a prescribed amount of time. But often when we're running asynchronous code, we don't know how long it will be unless we use something we're going to use today called set timeout. But in general, our code has just been running one line after the other. But we're about to change that because by its nature, JavaScript is synchronous unless we it's synchronous unless we code it asynchronously, which means wait. And then what do I have to do when this thing comes back from me waiting? Depends on how I coded it. Okay, so over here, just to give you that visual. So now to do this, we're going to need some things set up. So in our code, we're going to add some state variables. Now this idea of a state is like the state of your app, okay? And really, honestly, just introducing this, if you've heard of React or other frameworks that handle state, this is often what you are about to do, and you'll see the amount of effort we will take to get this done is often why, and we're doing a relatively simple thing, but this is one of the drivers behind having frameworks that handle this. But it is good to understand kind of the old way of doing it. And it's not old, it's still very contemporary if you need just these type of simple interactions. But anyway, okay, so let's copy this into all of our work for this time is going to be in the app.js. Okay, so in our app.js then, what we're going to do is at the top of our, all of our references, right? So let's go here after the clear. We're going to add a comment for state variables for inline confirmation of the clear all button. Okay, so there's two things we want to set up here, and we need to use let because of how they're going to be redeclared through our app. So we're going to say is confirming clear all equal, and by default it will be false. Okay, and then we'll put some context here, so let's write both. Is clear all timeout ID equal to null. So this is actually going to be the timeout we're going to use to wait a certain amount of time. Okay, so this button, let me make sure I have this in this. Yeah. Okay, so this tracks to see if the button is in its confirmed state. So we're going to set this based on the conditional code that we write. Okay, so and then this will store the ID returned by the set timeout. And I know you haven't seen the set timeout yet, but just know this is why we're doing it for the code that we're going to write next. Or, yeah, actually next. So now, inside, right? So now inside of our event listener for this clear, so let's scroll down and find it, right? So in here, right now, we're just calling clear no matter what. But what we want to do is actually say, did the user, right? So we're going to have the user first click it. We'll change the appearance, right? And only if they click it again will we then run this. Okay, so that's why those variables we needed. So we can say if, or actually first thing we have to do is something we haven't seen before, which is stop propagation. Now, in this case, the reason we're having to do that is users have been known to, as I suspect we all have, just clicking around. Like we do something, something doesn't happen, you just keep clicking, or you click other places. So what this allows us to do is, and I think I have this, yeah, prevents the click from potentially triggering other global click event listeners, because the more event listeners we want to be able to have to refer to help the user, but having too many and the things that aren't being used is not a good idea. So when we're in this situation where the user has clicked, right, we kind of want to do only this. It's basically what we're saying, don't fire off anything else, okay? So now we're going to write conditional code. So we're going to say if, in this case, that variable we said before, if confirming clear all, if it's true, right? Which we know right now by default it's set to false. Okay, so if it's true, then we will call this. Okay, only when it's true. Now we haven't written the code to set this to true yet. Okay, but we're just setting up that condition that says yes, it has to be true, but else we need to do some other things, change the class, right? Do some other things that we're about to do here. But let's just add this, right? So the second click, so the first time the user clicks, right? But this, if it gets here, that means we've changed this to be true, because like we just saw, we've set it in the global level to be false, okay? So now we're going to say, and matter of fact, let's just go ahead and grab the other one here, is to first click, okay? So this is the first click. This is the condition, the else branch that the user, right, has clicked the first time. So what are we going to do the first time? We're going to set is clear all, right? So that variable, now we're going to set it as true. And we can only do that because we set it to let, okay? And now we're going to say clear button text. And this is where we're going to say text content is going to be equal to are you sure, right? Click again. Now again, this is opposed to a pop-up that says please confirm, because by the way, pop-ups are really, we're trying to have those go away because they're just not good user interface, and there's other things that is a consequence that can be set that, you know, there's a consequence of people clicking on pop-ups, spam, spyware, other things. That's why in JavaScript we're trying to get away from the what we call the alert. So this is a way to handle the user saying, yes, I want to do this without having that alert. Okay? All right, so now what we're going to do here, now this is the set timeout. Okay, so now that we have changed the text, okay? Oh, sorry, there's actually one other thing I need to do. Okay, so once I do this, then I actually need to that button. And this is something I think we have, I'm trying to remember if we've seen it. If not, it's just basically saying, hey, I have a list of classes, and one of the things when we brought in that CSS file, now we can say, we're going to call, look at that class list and add this specific class. I'm going to do confirm state. That's where it changed to that yellowish color, okay? That's actually what this was, okay? All right, so that's what this does. Okay, so now that I have those, like, so I'm changing the text and then I'm changing the class. So I'm updating the user interface to give the user, hey, by the way, do you want to do this? And then what we do is we say clear that timeout ID that we set in the global above. We're going to have that equal to now the new code that I was talking about, where we're going to set a timeout, and which is literally set timeout. And there's a callback function that says, and we'll set an actual time in a minute. Okay, we'll wait a certain amount of time. And then, we don't have this function yet, but once this time has been, this is the idea of we're going to wait. We're going to wait for the user, because this is asynchronous. We're saying, okay, once you click, we're going to wait a certain amount of time, and if you don't, then we're going to do this, okay? So we're going to write this function in a minute. It's going to be called all clear, reset clear all button. Okay, again, we haven't coded that yet. But then we'll console.log, just to give us some context, clear all confirmation timed out. Okay, so this is like the user has not clicked. But in this case, and right between the end of the curly and before the end of the for some reason my head went clear, we put a comma, okay? So in this case we can put in the 3,000. Now you might go, what, 3,000? That's forever. So in this way it's actually just 3 seconds, okay? Parentheses. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Okay, so now this code, when you're first looking at it, can be like, why? Right? So we're actually, no, I think you can reason about this. So we're gonna and this is actually gonna be the ID of this set timeout that we need to be able to change and just set its value back to null. Okay, so now this code now needs, once the timeout, right? So we're going to wait 3 seconds, and then we're going to do this. We're going to reset, because we're going to say the user did not do something. They didn't click, okay? They didn't click on it. Because when they do click on it, then we'll set this right here. We'll set this to true, right? And then we'll come back through, and then we'll do this if they do click on it. So now let's go back up here. Let me see if I got all the did I already put this in there? Yeah, set timeout to automatically revert the button state if the user doesn't click, and then sets a timeout. Yep, 3 seconds. Already did that. Okay, so now right here we can test. We can actually test it at this point just to see. So over here, okay, let me just, okay. So we know our code is working in the state it is if what? What will happen at this case? Well, think about this. It's gonna wait, and after 3 seconds it's gonna run this code. Well, we already know that function has not been set up. So first, let's go ahead here. We have it. Oh, good. Okay. So now, in our event listener for clear all data button, right? Right now, what is the state? The state is that it's false, confirming, right? It's false, and that the clear all timeout ID is null. Okay, so now come over here. We're going to click. Let's come down here just so you can see it, and you'll see it down in here. So let's click, see if I got it right. After 3 seconds, it should error out because the callback here waited. Okay, so when we set this, and actually probably would be a good idea to also look at what that timer, right, that clear, I think I'll do that as well. But for now, let's just go ahead and code this. Okay, so now that we know it is working, right, so now we're saying, okay, after 3 seconds, let's revert it back to what it was before. The user didn't respond. Now you could debate whether 3 seconds is enough, but it's a good start, right? Okay, so now where should we put this code? Well, if we come over here, it seems to me I'd want to put it right here, okay? Because this is right after I've set these variables. And again, as long as we've set it up before we've called it, we're fine. So I'm going to say reset, okay, all button equal to a function, okay? What are we going to do in this function? We're going to say if, okay, clear all timeout. That's that ID. So this is a truthy value. If it's like right now, it's null. Okay, so because that would be false, it's not going to run this. But if it's true, right? If it actually has a number that was assigned to it because we ran the timeout, okay, then what are we going to do? If this is the case, then we're going to say clear, and this is a built-in API, a browser API function that says clear timeout. Okay, and then we'll give it the ID because we actually know the actual timeout. Okay, we'll say, okay, clear that timeout. Now, in this case, right, because now we're saying, okay, user didn't do it. Let's clear the timeout because, again, we're capturing for this logic below. But now we're going to say is confirming clear all is going to be equal to false. We're setting it back to its original state. This is where that's the idea of state. We're flipping that switch on and off to respond to the user. Now we'll clear button data dot text content and we'll take it back where it was. Clear all saved data. That's what it was before. Okay, and now we'll actually do a clear class list dot remove. Okay, so we're going to remove the danger button, and this is where it's hard to know based on what the user's doing the status of this code. So we're actually flipping this on and off a couple of times here. So then we'll say class list dot remove confirm state, okay, and now, and this might be like, why are we doing this back and forth? Okay, let's finish this and we'll come back and get some content for it, because it is hard to reason about a bit why we're actually doing this, because now we're going to actually add that danger, okay, because remember, anytime there's a red button, we're just giving the user, hey, what you're about to do is destructive. Okay? So if before you do something destructive, let's give you a visual, okay? And if you don't confirm that you want to do that, then we're going to flip it back. We're going to remove the danger. We're going to remove the confirm because it could be in either state at this in this situation. And then we'll add back the red danger. Okay, so let's go add some of our, so we're going to reset. Okay, so that's what this is doing. This function resets the clear all data button to its original text and appearance. Okay, clears any, so this clears any, this part right here clears any pending confirmation timeout. Okay, in fact, let's just do this. Let's just console log this here so we could see that number, because I actually am kind of curious. I didn't do that before. I should have. So if timeout is active, okay, if timeout is active, right, reset the confirmation state. Good. Okay. Oh, actually, no. Sorry, that one's not there. It's right here. Okay. This is that switch back and forth, and now we're going to restore the original buttons. Okay, restore original text and remove any special styling classes. And then we're going to re-add the button if it was recovered. It's part of the initial styling. And again, this really speaks to the idea of why people ended up writing frameworks was because of some of this switching on and off and handling state that wasn't necessarily pretty. but it gets the job done. But let's see if it actually gets the job done. Okay, so let's hit refresh here. We have our one entry. Let's get another. Good. So now if we click and we don't do anything, right? Boom, it goes back. Okay, so our code here, right, it resets. Oh, by the way, oh, actually it did on line 32. Right here, we did. So let's see what it is again. Is it just 3? Is it just going to count? Yeah, 3. So it's actually like how, like it's just tracking. Here's your first, right? It's setting a value. Sorry. So now let's actually, now we'll do it. And this time we'll actually click, clears it, takes it back to clear. Now, by the way, in the next one and the last one for this section, I'm actually going to fix this as well. Because in this state, this should not be here because we have no data. This button should be gone. Okay. But we have now written code that responds to the user, right? By having some logic that stops other things happening, like propagation here. We set up a variable, a global variable, to be standard as false, because this would only be true if the user clicked confirmation, right? Our first click, asking for, we set it to, so this is drops into the else. And then we set the context of the button itself, okay? And then we add the class, so the not the white, kind of the orange, and then we set the timeout. And this is where we've now introduced the idea of synchronous, or sorry, JavaScript by its nature is synchronous. We've introduced the idea of asynchronous. We're waiting, right? And we'll get more and more introduction as we move forward with the course on the idea. But JavaScript's by its nature, unless there's a callback. So whenever you've heard me say callback, that's actually asynchronous. But on 95% of the code we've written has just been synchronous, which means it just runs one line after the other. Okay, good stuff. And so on this one, right, so explain, right, synchronous versus asynchronous code in JavaScript. What are common ways to use timeout? Because it is used all the time. And basically it gives you the feeling of asynchronous code. But if you're really writing asynchronous code, you're probably calling an API and waiting for, because you have to call it out to the network, the internet, and then wait for the response, and you don't know how long it's going to come back. But when you set timeout, you actually say, okay, for this long, but it still is just waiting. You're waiting, and you have to have your code do something when it comes back. Okay, and in this case, just to finish here, what it's doing is once that 3 seconds is up, then it runs the callback, which I've mentioned callback a couple of times in this class. So now we're coming back around to talking about it again. Okay, the UI changes to confirm clear storage. Okay, one more and we're done with 6.2.